I think it's okay for us to be honest with ourselves and say, maybe I have no idea what most of my people are going back to tomorrow. And so if that's the first question we're going to ask, then I want to offer some I want to offer some practical ideas as to how to address that question. One of my favorite examples of this comes from a friend of mine here in Charlottesville, a guy named Paul Zock. He works at an Acts 29 church here in Charlottesville called Portico Church. And Paul, to address this question, began the practice of reaching out to his parishioners. He did this both publicly, like from up front, and then he, wrote emails and reached out to people one-on-one. And what he asked his parishioners, his members, is he said to them, I would love to come by your house sometime, maybe on a weekday, maybe on the weekend. And I would love to write a worship song with you. Now, the expectation here was not that they were going to write a bunch of masterpieces. I mean, I hope that maybe some masterpieces might emerge from a project like this. But the expectation was, I want to hear your story. I want to hear your spiritual struggle. I want to hear what your life is like and what a worship song sounds like out of your life, right? Now, sometimes the net result of that entire process was just a great conversation around a dining room table and maybe a couple lines of a song. Sometimes it was a finished song that could actually be sung on a Sunday morning. But what I want to suggest to you is that whether that conversation ended with a worship performance of the song, or whether it just ended with a great conversation around a dining room table, I want to suggest to you that that encounter was a transformative encounter for both parties. That was a transformative encounter for Paul as a musician and a songwriter to hear one of his people's stories in that way. And it was a transformative encounter for the parishioner who was seen, right? That parishioner, we talked about windows and mirrors, right? That parishioner just got a mirror held up to them. That parishioner now has a pastor or a worship leader who has seen them. If that's a little too intimidating, some people might be thinking right now, oh man, I could never do that. If that's a little too intimidating, I'll even offer up a one step easier. A colleague of mine named Luke Bobo works for an organization in Kansas City called Made to Flourish. And Made to Flourish is a great website. I recommend it, Made to Flourish, either .com or .org. You can just Google Made to Flourish. And it's a whole project that's really primarily for pastors, more so than worship leaders, but it has great lessons for worship leaders. And it's a whole program dedicated to better equipping and resourcing pastors for how to know what their people and serve their people in work and vocation. And one of the suggestions my friend Luke Bobo makes that I think applies very well for worship leaders is he makes the suggestion that, hopefully most of us already have some kind of a practice of visiting with our volunteers or visiting with our members. I mean, if you don't have that practice, I think you have to kind of stop what you're doing right now and make a practice of having lunch once a month or having lunch once every couple months with the people whom you're serving, right? But if you're like me, I mean, my practice of visiting people tends to be, let's meet up for lunch at a restaurant or something. That's kind of the typical way that I approach something like that. I say, let's meet up for lunch at a restaurant. Or let's meet at some familiar place. But what my friend Luke suggests is he actually says that people would be better off meeting their parishioners, not at a restaurant, not in a familiar known space like a coffee shop or something like that. But he actually suggests that we think about meeting our parishioners at their places of work, to actually say, hey, let's meet up for lunch on Tuesday. But when we meet up for lunch on Tuesday, why don't I swing by your office? Why don't I swing by the job site? Let's meet there, and then let's walk to lunch. Now, this is a really small thing, but I said I wanted to offer a really kind of low point of entry. As a really low point of entry, what's great about this strategy is that, number one, it's going to naturally mean that as you leave that person's office, or as you leave the work site, or as you leave the elementary school or whatever, you're going to have something to talk about, right? Like you're instantly going to say, oh, wow, that was interesting. Tell me about I didn't know that you worked at this hospital. Why did you decide to work at this hospital and not another hospital? You know, that you're instantly going to have something to talk about. But number two, when it comes to the way that you think about that person as they look out in the pew, as you look out at them in the pew on a Sunday, now you can really picture where they're going to be on Monday, right? Like now you've seen it, right? And not only have you seen it, but they know you've seen it. They know you've seen it, right? There's a different kind of connection that's happening now.